Welcome back to the White Gray Black Weekly Manga Podcast. My name is Bruce, the producer of the White Gray Black YouTube channel. With me again this week is Gautam.
What's up?
This is a book club, but not for books, it's for manga. And what are we reading? Everything that's currently being published. This week, we're going to talk about Monster Number 8 / Kaiju 8, Chapter 85, the Ichinose Family's Deadly Sins, Chapter 22, Oshi no Ko, Chapter 116, and Sakamoto Days, also Chapter 116. Normally, we would get started with the news, but there is no news this week. I literally could not find anything on Twitter to talk about.
Yeah, this is a slow week this week.
Yeah, well, and we're in a situation of the spring anime has started. We aren't close enough to the summer anime starting to get that kind of news. The new series in WSJ have been announced. Other new series have been announced. So it's just a little bit of a dead news time. There is stuff still going on, just nothing really big enough to chat about. So let's not dwell on it. Let's just talk about manga this week and not worry about anything else.
Okay.
Cool. I'll kick us off then. Let's talk about Kaiju number 8 / I actually think the English version still is calling it Kaiju number 8. I feel like they called it Monster 8 for a while and then changed it back.
Kaiju 8 is just the better title.
Kaiju number 8 is way better, yeah.
There's argument with Japanese and English titles, but I think everyone knows what a kaiju is at this point. So I think for that reason, it's just a better title.
Well, and it's like a kaiju has that Japanese context to it, and a monster could be anything. Even if the direct quote-unquote translation is monster to kaiju, then yeah, who cares? Anyways, let's it's been a while since we talked about this. I don't know if we've ever talked about it in a official capacity, maybe once. We used to really like this series, and it's been pretty mediocre, I would say, for the latter half of the series. Would you agree with that?
Honestly, maybe even more at this point, but yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, I thought that Kaiju 8 started really strong with a cool premise of, one, it has like an older protagonist, right, who's not a high school student or a young 20-something, right? He's like, what is he, 32? Is he my age?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like 32. He like works on cleanup after the monsters. So you're like, oh, cool. And he's like really good at it. It's like he knows about the internals of monsters and how to clean them up, etc. And I thought that was going to be a really cool angle, and it kind of was for like 2 chapters. And then he becomes possessed by Kaiju number 8. It's his superpower. And the first 2 or 3 arcs, maybe the first 20 or 30 chapters, I thought were really good. And then about since, what is it? There's like the attack on the base, I think, that they had. It was like right around that arc where I was like, okay, this is just kind of a normal shonen now. So
yeah, so it is kind of a normal, like, I think one of the biggest issues, right, is it doesn't have a compelling antagonist, which makes everything harder, honestly. Any kind of driving force you incorporate into your story way harder if you don't have a compelling or interesting antagonist. And I think this was like stated by every reader who had been reading this manga. To clarify, I haven't read like the last 5 or 6 chapters. I was just really uninterested, so I never got around to it.
Yeah, which I mean is kind of, I like passed it up today until I was kind of looking for what we're going to do on the podcast. But yeah, it has a lot of problems. I think it's run up against the same problem that Horikoshi ran into with My Hero Academia, which is part of the story they kind of had really planned out and really well fleshed out and really organized in their mind. And then once they got past that part, they still had to publish a chapter in Kaiju 8's case, every 2 weeks. But once you're kind of on the grind of drawing and creating and writing week to week, I think a lot of creative people's mind doesn't have the kind of the space, the freedom, the boredom maybe to kind of explore and think about what would be cool or what should happen next or whatever. Because it really feels like the start of Kaiju 8 is really strong. I think when the first season of the anime hits, it's going to be really good because that's easily the best part of the story. And then after that, yeah, it's just kind of like, well, time to do trope stuff, right? Time to do, silent killer, black-haired, not protagonist, but the commander guy or whatever. All that stuff is kind of generic. The main character is like, he has barely appeared in, I want to say he has been in maybe like less than half the chapters of the past year. So of the past 26 chapters, I think Kafka's shown up in like maybe 4 chapters. It's insane how little he shows up in this series.
I guess, what do you do when you have a main character and you have like a good first half of the storyline, and then after that, every other character you have written in the story is more interesting, and you regret making this guy your main? Like, I think the Commander Narumi guy, he's instant. Like, his first chapter, he was already the most interesting character.
Narumi's pretty cool. I really like the girl. What's her name? Kikuru.
The one we're showing right now.
She's easily the best character in the story, in my opinion. The sort of the secondary protagonist.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting, like, and you can see it, right? Because his best bud, Kafka's best bud, is also kind of, he has more screen time, sure, but he's also more sidelined. Like, the first 2 introduced characters are more sidelined than everyone else, right?
Yeah, which is a weird thing, because it's like, okay, maybe it's smarter to focus on the more interesting characters, but also it's kind of like, okay, but the start of it with Kafka was good, so I am like attached to that character. I do like that character, although he's kind of basically devolved into like a 14-year-old standard shonen protagonist instead of the kind of cool, older, mature, stuck in life type guy that he started the series as, who was like, I'm gonna, still pursue my dreams, etc. That's kind of all lost now, but yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of messy and generic and boring is how I would put it now. It isn't necessarily bad. I still think the art and the action paneling is is still really good in this series. I mean, especially it being every 2 weeks. I still really like the art. Like, I think the art's great. But yeah, I mean, like this final page here has a really cool like face shot of, I think this is Narumi. He's got kind of he like pushes his hair back and it kind of changes his character design. He looks cooler,
and I think Narumi is he's probably my favorite character up to the point I read, but it is also just the trope of, hey, let's put Gojo in my manga too,
Yes, there's very much the I mean, Gojo is the most current, maybe the most typical version of it, of like, I don't even know how to describe it. There's probably a real like literature term for this. There's just like the one really powerful, like the dude, right? It's it isn't in every story, but it definitely is in a lot of stuff. Like, I'm trying to think.
And the reason I use Gojo as an example is because it kind of just fits this archetype of like pretty boy, nice eyes, overpowered, but like on the sidelines when he's not fighting, he's kind of just a shithead who's like petty and goofy,
Right, yeah.
Like he's kind of a Gojo clone, but it works because Gojo's an interesting character. I wanted to actually, like, I know we should be doing a chapter discussion right now, but I wanted to get your thoughts on this, right? On Kaiju 8. So the discourse is generally that, and you brought this up as well, is that Kafka is like 30, but he acts like a kid. He acts like a 14-year-old, and it's weird seeing a character intentionally aged as an adult act like that. And in my brain, I think adults are allowed to act goofy and childish, but I think the reason this criticism is levied against Kafka is because adults don't usually act like that when it comes to serious situations, or when it comes to moments of adversity. There is a difference in how a child or someone who's still growing would react and analyze and handle a situation versus how an adult would. And I think when put in a million of those situations, Kafka keeps like doing the kid thing of, I don't want to communicate. I'm going to keep this to myself. I'm gonna it's like a very stubborn kind of.
Yeah.
Is that what you would say is the criticism of him not acting like an adult? Because I would agree.
I think it is a criticism. I think more so than necessarily that the character is acting like that now is the fact that the character did not begin the story acting like that. I think that the true sin here is more one of regression than it is necessarily of having a childish main character. I think almost every shonen under the sun has a childish main character in one way or another. I mean, Chainsaw Man, Denji from Chainsaw Man, Luffy from One Piece, Naruto, the main character of Bleach, whose name I'm forgetting, Ichigo. All these characters are like childish in one way or another, whether they're like adult or not.
Those are all children, so we can justify the childishness and stubbornness.
Also, well, I mean, but it's okay, I think, to have an adult acting childish. I mean, Luffy's like 20, right? Or 19, 20, 21, something like that now. So, not a child, but I think it's a worse, I would say it's a worse sin. The more disappointing part is that reading the first 20 or 25 chapters of Kaiju number 8, that's not the character Kafka is. He is very much more of a, I got left behind by my old best friend, this girl who's now like the, best killer in the army or whatever it is. I now have like a chance to kind of be with her, to keep the promise that we made, to do all this stuff. He kind of has that motivation going for him. And then later on, he's just kind of like, I gotta get stronger. Like, he just gets the standard, like, his motivations completely swap from this kind of, not necessarily mature, but this, like, much more intricate, it is mature, right? Of, like, I did not have a chance to, did not fulfill the dream and promise I made to my childhood friend. Now I have a chance to, but I'm behind. I've kind of aged past when I should have signed up, or I wasn't able to succeed previously. These are all like adult problems, right? I feel like I'm being left behind. I feel like I've aged past the situation where I could, have a change of job or something like that, right? Those are adult issues that, once you've had a job for 10 years or been in a situation, it's hard to change. Those are like adult issues. And those are the things he faces at the start of the story. And then now in the past, 4 or 5 arcs that he's been involved in, it's just like, oh, don't use Monster 8 too much because he'll take over your mind, or don't use your power because then the monsters know where we are. It's like it is all just kind of devolved into very typical kind of shonen power scaling.
Too. Yeah.
What was that? One more time?
Everyone is babysitting him at this point in the story.
Right. And so he just kind of isn't dealing with this kind of adult problems that we were introduced with, where he was a more interesting character. I thought the writing was way better. I mean, I remember I picked this up around chapter 15, maybe. I think you maybe picked it up a couple of weeks before, like at chapter 8 or 9 or something. But we've been with this.
We both picked it up at chapter 1. I picked it up at 1.
I think I might have picked it up at 1 and then stopped, because I remember binging like a decent chunk of it. I remember binging a good 10 or 12 chapters, right? Maybe it was like 8 or 9, pretty early, but but anyways, we've been with it from the start. And I remember when this first came out, like a chapter would drop and we'd talk about it and be like, yeah, this is this is better than a lot of other stuff that was out early on. But
and it was. And on top of what you said, I also think he made all of his buds, who are like half his age, right? But he made his buds and kind of helped them out by putting perspective into these child geniuses, to not rush in, have crazy expectations for themselves to the point where they're breaking their own bodies or dying,
Right.
And after a while, they gained that perspective, and then he lost that perspective, and they have to be the ones who are like, hey, bud, just talk to us, man. I know you're going through shit. And he's like, I'm talk to anyone.
Yeah, that's a good example for sure, that he early on was very, I just use the word mature over and over again, but he was very sort of tempered and slower and more adult and, mature about his decision making and rushing in, because that's kind of the shonen protagonist's Achilles heel, right? Is I'm the strongest, I'll rush in without thinking about it to fight everyone, and then they get defeated, and then they have to power up, and that's kind of the shonen protagonist's journey, which Kafka was not like that early on. And then now in the last couple, the last half of the story or so, that's just exactly who he's been. He's like, oh, I have to get stronger. I have to power of friendship, protect my friends. I will rush in. Yeah, it's more disappointing to me. I mean, this is one of the reasons that I think I complained so much about My Hero, about not liking it, now or for the past 4 or 4.5 years of publication, is that My Hero starts really strong and has some really cool stuff in the first, 60, 70, 80 chapters. And something that starts really strong and then drops off is like, it gives you the sunk cost fallacy in manga extends for a long ass time. I will tell you that, because honestly, My Hero Academia hasn't been really, really good since the the sports festival. It hasn't been kind of good enough since the Yakuza arc. And it's been 200 chapters since those happened. And I am still reading it week to week.
It had one good mini arc, but I would agree. It was like the gentle one, because it took it a step back and slowed down its own pace.
But that was
right,
like 3 years ago. That was immediately after the Yakuza stuff, by the way. So
anyways, I sidetracked us here, but go ahead and tell us about this chapter of Monster.
Yeah, this chapter is pretty interesting. This is Kikaru fighting a monster that is just a copy of her for some reason, which initially was kind of like, okay, yeah, whatever, the kind of shadow clone. The shadow clone version is a very typical thing. The very last thing that she did last chapter is beat this girl in a fight. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, I remember Kikaru won her fight. What are we going to do this chapter? This chapter, we're doing what I'm going to dub, we're demon slayering this, right? What that means, and I complained about this endlessly when the first season of Demon Slayer dropped, because it did it, I want to say with like almost every major bad guy in season 1, is that what's the main character's name in Demon Slayer? Tanjiro. As soon as Tanjiro starts to win, literally not even starts to win, as soon as Tanjiro is landing the killing blow with his sword on the bad guy, they would cut and do a flashback and give me character development for the bad guy when they are dead. They're dead in the water. Tanjiro is winning. They did this with 2 or 3 bad guys, and I hated it. I think it is one of the worst. I think it is, for shonen specifically, I actually think it might be the worst pacing decision I have seen. It's one of the worst pacing decisions you can make, right? Stopping your climactic fight where we were supposed to be, we're building up, there's a fight, you get that climactic release of the good guy is winning, the blade is going through the head, boom, it's going to be a celebration, this elation, this joy, this catharsis of of the climax happening, of the head being removed theoretically or literally, or symbolically or literally, and you stop and you go and you do a flashback, and that just kills. You are literally slamming the brakes of your story to go and flesh out a character who, as soon as their head is cut off, doesn't matter anymore. They literally do not matter when they're gone. They are an obstacle for your main character to overcome. Your character has overcome it. They are literally in the middle of confirming their arc of overcoming their obstacle, and you have slammed the brakes on your story. You are flashing back to some other thing, to again a character who, because the main character has overcome them, they do not matter anymore. I hate it. It is one of those things that just grinds me up inside how much I hated it, because everyone was raving about Demon Slayer. They're like, it's so good, the animation is so great, and I liked it well enough before it did that with the sort of, in the latter maybe 6 episodes, with the spider guy and the tree dude I think they did it with, and maybe one other person. It's just Sabers? Yeah,
they do that with every villain in that series.
And you told me that, and that's why I never have gone back to explore Demon Slayer, is that I think a writer who just continually does that, if they did it once, right, it's sort of like, oh, okay, sure, they made one mistake, whatever. But doing that with every single thing is that is a pattern of writing that I cannot stomach, and I will not force myself to read. Anyways, this chapter of Kaiju number 8 does exactly that, and I hated it, even though. Well, and the sad thing is, all that being said, it's like the flashback is pretty good and interesting and cool, and it really fleshes out the monsters as being these kind of intelligent, kind of sympathetic beings that are a reflection of humanity. They kind of have the same kinds of wants and stuff. All that's really interesting. The problem is you're doing it. I mean, I don't know if you can see on this page in the bottom right hand corner. That is literally the bad guy's head falling, like as the flashback starts. Like this is exactly what I was. This is Demon Slayering the story, right? You are slamming on the brakes. This whole chapter should have been the celebration, right, of she overcame, she can go help the other people, how are the other fights doing, let's swap to the others, whatever. And we get a little bit of that at the very end, but I just, man, if you're a writer and you're listening, my advice to you is that if you're, do not, one, there's a couple of things here. One, do not slam on the brakes once you start your climax fight, right? Once that gets going, you see it through to the end without, I would say without switching focus even, because I think it takes a lot of practice to do something like Oda does in One Piece and sort of switch focus. But even Oda is pretty good about when it's time for a climactic fight to sort of like play out, and especially through the end. That's kind of the whole chapter. It happens with, Luffy versus Kaido. It happened with Big Mom versus the Supernovas in Wano. It happened with Sanji and Sanji versus Queen and anyways, just for some recent examples from One Piece, from a good writer. Just don't, once you're doing your climactic fight, don't swap, keep the camera focused on the character. The part that I want to see, and I think the part that a lot of people are really interested in here, is we want to watch our character overcome the obstacle in front of them, and we don't want that to be interrupted, just from a story pacing perspective. The other thing is, flesh your bad guy out before the fight even starts, because that literally makes you invested in the fight the second it starts. It's just as simple as that. Don't cut away once you've started your big action. I'm trying to think of can you imagine if, did you ever watch Ninja Warrior?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if it was like the final, the final thing is like the little slanted wall that they have to like run up? Can you imagine like watching someone do a full Ninja Warrior course and then just not showing them run up the very last part, and then just cutting to them right as they hit the button? And you're like, even if you know that they made it up, you're like, you have literally cut out the kind of final hurdle, the final obstacle set up in a story. It's just garbage. So anyways, writing advice from me: once you start your climax, see it through to the end, don't cut away, and always try to flesh out your antagonist or whoever is the second party in the fight that's not your main character, or not the person we know less. Flesh them out before the fight even starts. If we know what both of the characters are bringing into the fight, if we know what stakes they have before the fight starts, that makes the fight better. That makes us more invested in the fight. If I had seen this flashback before this fight started, if we had known all this information, I think I would be here in front of you talking about this chapter and this last arc in like a much more positive tone. I think it would have been really good to be like, yeah, Kikaru had this stuff with her dad, and then it turns out that the monster that she fought also has these kind of daddy issue thing going on, and they fleshed out beforehand, and when they met, they were both bringing the same kind of I need to impress my dad energy into it, and so we knew that the winner was going to be the one who came away with that regard from their father figure, but instead, literally, the bad girl's head rolls before we learn any of this information, and so it just doesn't work at all. So yeah, sorry, Monster. Sorry, Kaiju 8. This is not good. I don't like this. You Demon Slayered it, and I'm not happy about it. So,
yeah, that's unfortunate. I wonder how the series is doing sales wise.
It still does pretty good, from what I understand. It is still ranked. I think it is still in the top 10 on Manga Plus. Manga Plus has like the by views. I mean, because I was checking today, and I was like, oh, like Sakamoto Days is like 14 without an anime, and like that's really good. Kaiju 8 is... Oh, maybe not. Kaiju 8 is 13. So, For comparison, like Dan to Dan is at 11, Spy Family at 9, Oshinoko at 6.
It's doing great. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's still definitely pretty high up there. So, yeah, so I did my tangent. I did my, take a steaming dump on Kaiju 8. It's not that bad. The art is still good. It's still fun. I again, think that if the first season of the anime, because I think this got a good studio, right? This got Bones or somebody behind it. Bones or Madhouse is doing Kaiju 8. Although the preliminary character design pictures we saw were not great, so who knows?
I think they'll be fine. I think people are just judging based off of things that aren't in motion yet. I agree.
For sure.
But let's
any
wait
other?
For TV.
Yeah, I've said my piece on Kaiju 8. Anything else you want to talk about or know about it here?
No, I was just going to mention that incredibly on point, even more than the climactic moment, are the stakes of the battle. Otherwise, they're just an unknown versus your main character, right? And you know the outcome. The stakes are less. Especially like even Demon Slayer, they have cool backstories. It's just
they do
when it doesn't matter anymore, right?
And I again, like I said, I thought this was a good, well written, and like this is a sort of perfect foil to Kikaru in this situation. They have kind of the same stakes going into the fight. The problem is we only learned about the monster's stakes after she was dead. And I mean, I do also remember in Demon Slayer, the spider guy, which is like the big fiery slash that you saw. That's one of the best animated things in the TV anime I've ever seen because Ufotable's great. But that's a good backstory too. I mean, that guy got like abused and abandoned and passed around. It's like, and yes, like that's a good, well-told backstory. The problem is it loses all significance when it is put as the bad guy's head is being removed. Yeah.
I agree.
Cool. Well, why don't you tell me what you're bringing this week? This is one we've talked about a decent amount, but also has this might be our week to just shit on the manga.
That's what I was going to say. I didn't realize this would be our bitching episode, but here we are.
It's not. I promise the last two things we're going to talk about are on a much more positive note. So.
Yeah, sure. Maybe. No, so what I realized first is that on slow weeks like this, I just realized how much better the One Piece chapter is than anything else that comes out. And we talk about One Piece too much, so I'm not going to go into it. But if you want to read something good, go read the new One Piece chapter. It's fucking awesome.
I mean, I should set up an automatic tweet to just tweet at like 10:01 Sunday morning every morning to just be the picture from Parasite that's just like One Piece is crazy good this week.
It's crazy good. Is that from Parasite? Damn,
I believe that is from Parasite, the anime. Yeah.
Oh, got it.
I think I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Which is a very good series.
I just never put it together.
Yeah.
Parasite's great.
Anyways, tell me about this is the Ichinose family's Deadly Sins chapter 22. Yeah, I couldn't remember.
So, this wasn't great. And it's not because the content's not great. I think it's emotionally resonant. So in this chapter, this is following last chapter, where they are trying to get their memories back, of course, like always. And they go to, like, kind of a landmark spot that they all remember, and the grandma of the family pushes Tsubasa, our main character here, off a cliff. And then he wakes up in the hospital and in this chapter, and he's freaking out. And he won't tell anyone anything because his grandma just killed him. And this is where we're going with it. At the moment, the series is... The issue is not that it's not interesting. It is very interesting. It has emotionally resonant beats that aren't emotionally resonant, for the reason I'll mention in a second. It's a mile a fucking minute. There's a twist every single chapter, to the point where we're not even getting character stuff that much anymore. It's more so, what is the next twist that's going to happen? Because in the last, 5 chapters, they're like, oh, you're stuck in a time loop. Oh, you're not stuck in a time loop. This is some sci-fi bullshit that's going on. It's not sci-fi bullshit. Your grandma has Alzheimer's, and it's like
you have Alzheimer's. Maybe Grandpa has Alzheimer's. Somebody has Alzheimer's in the family. We don't know who. That's the new mystery.
It is throwing everything at the wall, and I feel like baby's first sensory overload video, where I'm just like, I'm absorbing too many twists at the moment that I can't feel anything anymore for this situation. It's like too much.
Yeah, I would say in the sort of the sort of 5-pronged manga review thing that I use, characters and plot are two of the big ones. I agree with what you're saying. This series has essentially abandoned the character stuff that it had done early on and is full on just plot. It kind of tries to, I don't want to say keep characters. It kind of tries to make the character moments be impactful, but because they've kind of abandoned all that character development in favor of, like you were saying, just twist after twist after twist that changes up kind of the status quo, it's exhausting to read. And it's kind of exhausting to go through and be like, because the first time where it was like, oh, the dad wrecked the car on purpose and he wakes up with a new dad. That's kind of like, ooh, interesting, cool. And they wake up and they aren't all dead. Interesting, what's happening here? And then we have the mom's arc. And then after that, it's like, oh, the new dad knows what's going on, twist. And then it's like, oh, you're in a coma. The lead character's in a coma, twist. And then, we got this like Alzheimer's stuff. We got
the murder plot, and this is moving past
the murder plot
stuff. Is like
the sister stuff that doesn't matter. The grandma pushed him off the cliff at the end. That's another twist. And this is like in the span of like 2 months, like 6 or 7 chapters. Is all this shit happened.
We are 22 chapters in. That is not a lot for the amount of shit that happened.
And of course, I mean, now it's easily like a third of it has just been this twisty stuff. Because I mean, you can go back and listen to. I think we recorded when this hit chapter 1. Maybe our first episode is like chapter 1 of Ichinose Family's Deadly Sins. So we're really high on this for a lot of weeks. We would bring it up, and it's really good. Again, I don't think it's bad. This is not as bad as Kaiju 8, where it kind of is like just, garbage writing. Like, it's still good writing. It's just kind of writing around a plot and these twists rather than the character stuff, which is where I really think Taizen 5 does better work. So
this feels like it's written by Hideo Kojima with no editor, an ideas guy made this with 80 good ideas, but you can't throw them all in the same work. Yeah. It's that's how it feels at the moment.
It's like M. Night Shyamalan. M. Night Shyamalan sat down with Hideo Kojima and Taizen 5, and they chatted for 2 hours, and Taizen was like, I can write that, and this went and did it.
And at the end, it's going to be nanomachines. That's the main twist.
I shit you not, nanomachines could show up. I still, when we talked about this weeks ago, I'm still betting there's some kind of hyper advanced sci-fi or alien or magic like that, because the Takopi's, what is it called?
Takopi's Original Sin.
Original Sin. I was like, Deadly Sins. Yeah, Takopi's Original Sin. Also had that angle of sort of space magic, space technology stuff. I'm assuming we're still going to get something here. The problem now is that even if the next chapter they tell us, if the next chapter they give us aliens or something like that, it's going to feel garbage. It's going to feel like dog shit because you've had all these other twists before it. The story really needs time to breathe. So speaking of, I told you don't, if giving writing advice, don't slam on the brakes during your climax. At the same time, do use your brakes use your brakes and slow the story down when you have time to, and when you need to let a story breathe and expand. And this one is just moving too fast for me. And again, it's not bad. And
the problem is speculation is just not fun anymore because the author is clearly trying to throw you off the trail, which works sometimes, but like I feel like in any good story, you like to speculate what happens next based on the world building. But since there are so many different trails to follow, like 8 or 10 different trails to follow, and we get subverted every chapter. I was gonna say every other, but that's not true. It's every chapter.
It's every chapter.
There's no point in trying to figure things out anymore because you won't get there. And by any logical means of storytelling, you won't get there. So I don't know. It's less fun.
Did you ever watch Westworld?
Yeah, I got like 8 episodes in or something.
Okay, because this is the Westworld season 2 effect. There's a better name for it. Westworld season 1, everyone kind of figured out all the twists, but it was still a really good season of television. And one of the reasons it was good is that they planted enough foreshadowing and hints and wrote around the twists in such a way that they were predictable to those who were paying attention, but satisfying. In season 2 of Westworld, and those are the only 2 seasons I've seen, in season 2 of Westworld, they specifically went around writing that season to not let people guess what was going to twist, what was going to happen next. They did not want you to be able to predict the ending. And it feels kind of similar to this, right? Where it's like, okay, if you've sort of planted seeds and hinted at one thing and then thrown it off in one way and then thrown it off in another way and then misdirected again, it stops being it's exactly like you said. You want to stop predicting what's coming next because it's not satisfying anymore.
Yeah.
Because the story has not given you any foreshadowing or setup for, I mean, there was I would say no foreshadowing for the grandma pushing him off the cliff. There was maybe a little bit of foreshadowing for him being in a coma. There was foreshadowing for the new dad kind of knowing what was going on. But like half of the last of the, like 2 of the last 4 things were just kind of twists out of nowhere.
Yeah, it felt that way. And I think George R. R. Martin also said something similar, where he said, "Yeah, everybody, somebody has guessed every part of Game of Thrones. This is before the final season. Everyone has guessed everything that's going to come. And the thing is, don't change anything, because your audience aren't these people online who can guess everything you do. Your audience probably isn't nearly as online. They just love your books, and 99% of the people reading it won't see it coming."
Yep. I will say, predictability is not inherently bad unless the rest of the story around it is not high quality enough. I'm trying to think. For instance, like, did we see Top Gun Maverick? Or I saw that with my mom, I want to say. Or did we go see that?
Nah, we saw that.
We saw that? Okay. That movie's hella predictable. You could call, I mean, there was like a not even there weren't twists. There were a couple of like surprises. Maybe they executed part of it, but man, I could have told you beat for beat how that movie was going to go. And that movie still rocked because it was well executed. This, the heart, the character was there, the story, the plot was interesting. Who cares if it's predictable that, like, yeah, of course, spoilers, Tom Cruise doesn't die in that movie. Of course he doesn't die in that movie. He's going to make it out. They, crashes behind enemy lines or whatever. And of course he, makes it out some way. That's okay. Predictability is okay if your fundamentals of writing, if your characters are interesting. People like to guess and be right. Like, that's a satisfying thing in a story also. Like, making predictions. I mean, we do it tons on the podcast, right? We make predictions over all kinds of stuff that we're reading. And when we're proved right in a couple of days or weeks or whatever, that feels good. It doesn't feel better to have some Deus Ex Machina out of left field come and surprise you. You've already surprised a lot of people who don't care to guess about what's going to happen, who are just along for the ride. So, yeah, so more writing advice. Be careful about writing to those people who really like predicting and are really smart and are really tuned into the foreshadowing you're writing. That's okay. It's okay if a story is predictable, if the bones around it are still solid.
And plus, those people care about your work like so passionately for a reason, right? Even if they can guess it, they still love it enough to do the work, So,
exactly.
I think an unpredictable series, and we talk about this one all the time, is Chainsaw Man, and I think it does it right. I can't predict Chainsaw Man. I don't think most people can. But
that is also... Sorry, go on.
It's also set up properly, right? It's just one of these... I think Fujimoto just doesn't think on the same wavelength as normal human beings, and is so unique in how he writes that it's just very hard to predict, and I love that. But I think Tyson 5 is kind of doing the opposite here and just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping one of these will be enough to subvert like the diehards who are trying to overanalyze their work. But
or maybe it's possible that all of these twists somehow converge into a single moment or something that makes them all make sense. I can see that happening, right? If this is some kind of I mean, again, I'm not gonna guess because you're right. It's just not fun anymore. But yeah, I mean, it's not totally lost because again, this has only been the last 5 or 6 chapters of 22 chapters. The rest of it's been really good. So not the end of the world yet. Yeah, and in Fujimoto's case, just wanted to address that. You are right that he has never told a typical story, and so when things don't go the way you're expecting, that is what I was expecting to be surprised. I was expecting the unexpected, and so in a way, Fujimoto does write in a very expected and predictable way. The way he writes is unexpected and unpredictable, and we know that, and you predict that, and that's kind of why it is satisfying to read, because it's always like that. Whereas here in Ichinose Family, the start of it was pretty straightforward, and then after that, it's kind of changed. But I think that it's in Chainsaw Man, it's a little bit different. So,
yeah, I would agree. Fujimoto is anything but conventional. Seeing conventional writing out of him would actually be jarring.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Sorry,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say I hate to go too deep into Fujimoto and Chainsaw Man, but the other thing is that if you kind of remove how you get there, Fujimoto does write a pretty typical story. If you just want to talk about the complete kind of season 1 of the manga, most of the story beats are not predictable necessarily, but typical, even if kind of the way you get there. I mean, thinking of like, they get trapped with the Infinity Devil, and how do they get out? Well, Chainsaw Man fights the Infinity Devil and wins. Now, the way that happens is wild, and you couldn't have really guessed exactly how it happened, but if you kind of boil it down to the beats of the story, it is kind of normal. That's kind of why I think Fujimoto's stuff works. I mean, even looking at the latter half, I won't spoil it because we're not talking about it, but even just looking at the latter half stuff, those things that happen are surprising but inevitable, which is words that I've used, I think, in the past to describe kind of a good twist should be surprising but inevitable. But Fujimoto is more about being kind of wild and different in the way that you get there, while the story being told is kind of typical is not the right word, but it has some very standard story beats of betrayal by a mentor, and the main character fighting against that, and loss of friends, and those sorts of things are all just kind of typical story beats at the end of the day, or at least standard regular story beats. But the way that Fujimoto goes around, the way he tells them, and the style of them, and the way they're sort of overcome, that's kind of where he's a little bit different. So his actual story, I would say, isn't that different than a normal story. It's just kind of all the little building blocks he's using to make it. He's built a normal house out of strange pieces.
So I think it's impossible to write a manga without the same broad strokes normal story structure. I don't think you can get anything into the mainstream without having a structured story in a given way. I think it's the middle parts are where you get to be creative. And I think Fujimoto is very, very fucking creative in those middle parts.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same. There's I think it's a screenwriter or somebody who, and I'm already going to misquote this, and I've already written it. He says there's only really, it's like 3 stories or 4 stories. Like, there's only ever really like boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back, boy wants thing, or like boy goes on a quest, right? There's only really a couple of like sort of base boiled down stories to tell. And if you can tell that story with, like I was talking about, sort of like more interesting building blocks, that's still good. So yeah.
Anyway, let's sorry, we went so far down the side street there. Let's wrap up Ichinose 22, because I think I mainly wanted to talk about what we talked about right here. The chapter itself is basically the grandma might not have Alzheimer's. It is likely the grandpa. Well, it is definitely the grandpa who has Alzheimer's. I think that's emotionally resonant, mainly because I had family members that have had Alzheimer's, and it fucking sucks. But I don't know if for the mainstream audience, if this is emotionally resonant or if it's just for me. I feel like this, if it wasn't me who has experienced this before, I think for a normal audience, this would just be another twist on top of another twist. I don't know.
Well, and I can be the other side of that to you because my great grandpa, who died when he was like 97 or something, like 20 years ago, he I think had Alzheimer's for the last couple of years, but I was like 8 or 9 when he died. But none of my close family members, grandma, grandpas, anyone that I've known in the last more recent history has ever had Alzheimer's. So I don't have that connection. And that you are correct. That is the way it felt to me. This just kind of was, it's just kind of another twist. Does it matter if it's the grandpa instead of the grandma that has Alzheimer's? No, that's kind of a weird misdirect that didn't need to kind of be flip-flopped on. And it does still work. I mean, it is still sad. I'm not that emotionally disconnected that I don't understand the sadness of Alzheimer's and those kinds of things. But yeah, because I don't kind of have the personal investment, it is just kind of, I was going to mention, it's kind of like, okay, it's, one grandparent having Alzheimer's versus another doesn't really change anything. And the fact that there's like a misdirect that it's the grandma, but then it's the grandpa, it's like, why do that? Why does it matter? Alzheimer's is bad and sad. And you don't need to play with my feelings over, is it grandpa or grandpa that has it?
Because it's like we don't care about the grandparents or really any of the characters yet, so it doesn't matter which one has Alzheimer's. It feels like it Tizen 5 thought we cared about the family more than we actually do at the moment.
Yeah,
but we're too inundated with the plot that none of the characters have breathed,
Yeah,
so.
and I do think that I do think that I'm more connected to the grandpa, so in that way it does work. I think that it doesn't work as well because I'm not as well connected to the grandma, and so that's kind of where, if both characters were equally developed, it would have hit better. You're absolutely right. They needed to spend a bit more time on both grandma and grandpa, but I think especially on grandma.
Yeah, for me, grandma is just someone who tried to murder their grandchild. That's all I really know about her.
Yeah,
so
she has not done much else other than that. So,
like her plight, I don't. It does not I get it. She wants her husband to not have Alzheimer's or to like be in this reality where they can remember
the fantasy reality. He doesn't have it, maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But either way, it just doesn't feel earned yet. So I still felt the sadness mainly because it relates to me personally. But I think if I spiriting away from my own body into that of the general audience, I just don't know if I don't think it works like you said.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my thought on Ichinose. I would love to see it come back in a big way.
Yeah.
I think it has the bones. I think everything is there for it to work. But I think it's also important at this kind of midpoint of the series, or at least what it feels like, that we talk about what we don't like about it.
Yeah. I'll title this episode, you'll see it go up, is like, let's just shit on manga for like an hour. And then the next two things I think are a little bit better. But I'm trying to think about Takopi, about Taizen 5's last thing, because I do remember the middle chapters being not as good. The part that really sold me on Takopi was the ending. So I do think that if this is just a slightly down, arc, couple of chapters, this is not past, a moment of return of I'm going to drop this series again, because there's the investment thing, whatchamacallit, that we were talking about.
Yeah.
I'm invested. The start of the story is really good. I do want to know what's going on. I want the plot to kind of solidify instead of being this kind of globular liquid mess that flows around everywhere. So, I'm still going to stick with it. I think you are too. It's just kind of in a little bit of a weird down space. So,
can you title this "We Don't Care About Alzheimer's"?
Yeah, I'll maybe.
Yeah. No, don't.
I'll write it down, but
we don't care about Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Oh man. That'll be a nice
Alzheimer's in manga is bad writing. The episode.
Oh no.
Okay, cool. Anything else about the Ichinose family's deadly sins?
Nah, I just kind of wanted to have a discussion on what you thought about the spaghetti on the wall.
We talked about it.
Yeah.
Let's chat about something that I think's been really good recently, and everyone's talking about the anime. So let's talk about Oshi no Ko by Aka Akasaka and Mango Yokoyari is the artist. This is chapter, what do we say, 116?
I'm a chapter behind. But yes.
Okay, well, I'll give you the skinny on it real quick. This is the three girls. Oh gosh, I'm gonna forget their names. It's Ruby and
Akane.
Yes, and then the other movie star girl. And they are essentially, they kind of have set up a competition to see who's going to get the role of Ai Hoshino in the movie. They kind of figure that out in, maybe it was last chapter, maybe it was this chapter, but they kind of go through the process of auditioning, although the sort of big onus here is that Ruby steps up to the plate, right? Ruby is clearly the least acting experienced, and if you really had an acting competition here, she wouldn't win, but she kind of says, hey, this is my mom, this is my brother who's spearheading this, and you can see on this page here, hopefully, she says, like, it's my responsibility. It's like, it irritates me to go along with Aqua's idea. I didn't even care if I lost this audition till a while ago, but now it's different. I won't give up until I win, blah, blah, blah. She's going to play her mom because she's the only one who understands the loss of her mother, and all that stuff. So, this is really interesting. I don't think Oshi no Ko has had one little kind of part, and I was like, man, I don't like this very much, or as much, but it was like 2 chapters long, and it's back on track. The anime is killing it. How have you felt about this arc in general? This sort of Aqua setting up the Ai Hoshino movie and these 3 girls getting together to audition, and the really interesting part at the very end is Aqua's ex-girlfriend, who used to say, oh, I'll help you do anything, I'll help you kill the guy who killed your mom. Yeah, she's like, I'm going to stop you. And Akane, that's her name, Akane Kurakawa. And there's this cool panel. This is the last page of the chapter. But if you think you can stop me, go ahead and try. Like, it's clear that Aqua has been breaking bad for a while now, but continues to break bad, which is interesting and fun to watch, I think. So, how have you felt about Oshi no Ko?
Aqua has been season 2 post Breaking Bad Walter since he got reincarnated. Since his mom died. His second mom died.
This panel has big I am the one who knocks energy, or like, for sure it does. He's just like, if you think you can stop me from killing, like murdering this dude, go ahead and try. Or from emotionally manipulating literally everyone with this movie. Yeah.
I think the Edgelord twins are completely spiraling, of course, as they have been. I feel like the story is going to be around about the people who they helped along the way, kind of checking them in a way. You know what I mean? Because I don't think this is going to be a revenge tale as we know.
You don't think so?
I don't think so at all. Because I think that's because of the beginning interviews at the beginning of the series.
Yeah.
Where everyone is kind of doing a post-mortem, not for IE, but like just in general.
For the release of this movie that came out, I believe is what they're doing a post-mortem for.
Right.
And so we're getting closer to looping back around to those interviews.
Yeah. So I don't think the edgy duo here will get their way in how they expect to. You know, I think the ultimate conclusion of the story is them living healthier lives.
I agree with you exactly 50%. And I will tell you why. I don't think Aqua makes it out the other side. I don't think he makes it out the other side. Not necessarily that he dies. I think that Aqua is willing to sacrifice himself for his goals. I think eventually he will reach a moment where he will make that sacrifice for Ruby. I don't know. I don't see both of them coming out the other side. I think that one of the things that Aka Akasaka has really tried to go into and uncover is sort of the way that entertainment and the idol industry and the movie industry and this sort of entertainment conglomerate machine absolutely does not let people escape it without chewing them up and spitting them out, right? And I think that one side of that is from the fan consumer side, and I think that's reflected in the person who kills Ai Hoshino early on, and I think the other side of that is from the performer internal side, right? That actors, especially child actors, especially new actors, idols, those types of things. I don't think Aka wants to tell a story where the entertainment industry is left without blood on its hands. And I think that if you let both Ruby and Aqua sort of quote unquote get away with not being chewed up and spit out in some way, or not kind of having blood on their hands, or being kind of part of the sacrifice to this machine of entertainment, I don't think the story works if you let both of them get away. I think you either...
I don't agree with that.
That's totally fine.
Because the blood is already there, i.e., you know? So and here's another reason why I said why I think they come out clean. I think this is a scathing review of the entertainment industry, and accurate review of the entertainment industry. Yeah. But it's still kind of like a little sci-fi narrative in the first place. And I think it comes down to the character of Aqua, who he was before he was Aqua, and how he acts as Aqua. He is the most self-loathing character. I don't think there's a single moment in this series where he gave a shit about himself. He is only giving a shit about other people. But I think the story is going to be about kind of raising the old self-esteem a little bit, you know? Because
I could see
hurting himself is hurting other people, you know? I think it's going to be that kind of route.
I agree with basically everything you've said, but I think I'm taking the more negative side because I think that, well, I agree with you that Aqua has been kind of selfless. I think that selflessness, that selflessness from his perspective, he thinks that he'll give up himself in a selfless act to get revenge for his mother, right? And so I think that he thinks he's acting selflessly when he is actually acting selfishly. So I can definitely see it. 100%. I can definitely see it going where he's sort of corrected in that by the end. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I definitely agree with you. I just think
I do want to clarify one point on that. It's not just selfless; it's self-loathing 100%. He actively hates himself.
Right.
All of his panic attacks are what is it when you don't feel like you're worth anything, but you're given stuff?
Like your self-esteem?
Syndrome.
Oh, imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Imposter syndrome. Yeah, he has it.
Well, I mean, a dude literally reborn into a superstar's child. This might be the only time that imposter syndrome is correct. Is like kind of justified and correct. Yeah, I think usually imposter. Yeah, I mean, he literally kind of is, right? Him, I think more than Ruby, because Ruby was like a young girl when she died, and she's just kind of getting a second chance to do what she would have wanted to do if she had a real life. But Aqua's original person was like, 35, 40, something like that. So yeah. I don't know. I'm curious to see, because it definitely could go either way. I could definitely see it going like you said, where they kind of both make it out. I can also see it ending kind of like Breaking Bad ends, right? Where it's like, I'm trying to not spoil Breaking Bad. Everybody's seen Breaking Bad, right?
I get what you mean.
Where everything kind of goes wrong. Yeah, everything kind of goes wrong, and then the sort of broken bad character comes back to kind of make a sacrifice and make things as right as he can in the end. I could see something like that happening too, even if it doesn't require the same sort of sacrifice that the end of Breaking Bad requires. I'm really curious. I mean, like we were talking about, the fact that we are speculating about the end here is testament to the writing and how interesting and how good and spaced out the sort of twists and reveals have been. Because this is excellent, and I am definitely... I'm in 100%. Oshi no Ko's great. I think we're going to have a lot of new fans. Hopefully some of you spend some time to read the story and catch up, because it is... Aka Akasaka is one of the greatest modern manga writers, for sure. Just his command of both humor and drama. You haven't read it, but this... this page right here is just hilarious in the middle of this like massive drama, where it's just like, oh, this is really awkward. And the Aka Akasaka's big mastery, in my opinion, is this balance of comedy and drama.
I like how she's shaking in the bottom panel out of awkwardness.
Yeah, it's
she's
just
like shivering. Oh, that's funny.
It's great. Cool. Anything else about Oshi no Ko here?
No, I think this, like, just to tie it back into, considering we're talking about like writing sins and whatnot. I think what Aka does is he establishes characters and writes characters in specific ways so well that instead of like kind of a logical conclusion we can approach if we're thinking about something like Ichinose family, it adds an extra layer of complexity that makes us guess, because everyone is erratic, because everyone is emotional. Human beings in general, right? Especially in this industry. So you don't know how things will go at all, because it's all up to how decisions are made by people in the series. So you're absolutely right. It's a very humanist isn't the right word, but it's like it relies on these characters making sort of flawed decisions, or they're not always going to make the right choice, and that kind of drives the drama. And that's what's great, I think, about a lot of Aka Akasaka's writing, especially in Oshi no Ko. Agreed.
Cool.
Real quick, I know I didn't warn you about this or tell you about this at all, but
surprise segment.
But were you able to read the new chapter of Versus?
I did not get to that. That is...
Okay.
Yeah, I've read the last, what is this, chapter... We're on chapter 6 now, or chapter 5?
I think it's 5.
Yeah.
It's kind of bizarre how slow it is.
Well, we talked...
Not great.
We talked about it... We talked about, I want to say, chapter 4 a month or so ago, maybe just briefly, but it was doing a lot of telling and not a lot of showing, where it just kind of like spent all of chapter 3 going through all the different types of people, and chapter 4 kind of just everyone talking and planning, and there wasn't a whole lot of action or anything.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like chapter 5 is more of that, right? A lot more telling instead of showing.
Kind of worse than chapter 4.
Ooh,
because
okay.
It just repeats a lot of the things it said in chapter 4. But let's reconvene on that, I think, next week. I want to know what you think on it.
Yeah, we'll meet back up on that in a couple of weeks at some point. Cool. Let's talk about something that has also continually been pretty good to great. Let's talk about Sakamoto Days by Yuto Suzuki. This is, I was going to say chapter 116, but it is in fact days 116 is how it is classified in the chapter. This chapter is called Friends. Let's see. We are
a great chapter.
We're like doing always. The flashback still, which I think we may have been the last time we were talking about it. A flashback with Sakamoto and what is the girl's name? Akane? I don't remember.
No,
Japanese names are hard. There's so many names when you read manga like this.
I don't know. It's that the young assassin's aunt who's apparently dead. In the
right.
series,
who is supposedly dead. We have been told she is dead. I'm doubtful, but
I guess we will see in this flashback.
Surprisingly, there's less to say about the writing here than our previous 3 manga, I would say. Why? Because the writing in Sakamoto Days is straightforward, simple, anywhere from pretty good to good enough. It's never really bad. It's simple and straightforward. On this one, this bad guy that is fighting Sakamoto thinks that if you have more good karma, you will win the fight. And so he has this funny thing where he thinks that Sakamoto is like, oh my gosh, how many good deeds have you done? You're so much stronger than me. That's kind of goofy. And we also get the other 2 assassins here fighting a sort of poison smoke man in a closed space. That's kind of interesting. They're trying to protect the Japanese Assassin Association's president's wife and daughter, I believe.
Right. Yeah, that's correct.
But yeah, poison gas, we get, I mean, this is so, the action paneling here is so good. I just love every panel where Sakamoto is doing anything is just like, this is sick. It's also one of those, this has a cool moment in this chapter where Sakamoto kind of like, okay, I'll stop messing around and take you seriously. And as soon as he does, the bad guy is like, oh, what happened? An explosion? It was just one blow. It's like all of a sudden his vibe changed. What are those? He's like, I'm dead. It's like, this guy is going to kill me instantly. I can tell.
I love that. It's always hype too, right?
It's like, so hype, yeah. Because you Sakamoto Days does such a good job of sort of like, not underselling, but sort of like playing around with how strong Sakamoto is. And then you get these like couple of moments where it's just like, oh yeah, like it's him, but like I don't know, what's the meme? It's like, it's him, I'm him. I don't know. It's very much just a sort of like, oh yeah, Sakamoto is absolutely, power scaling. Sure, let's talk about it again. It feels like an every week segment now. He's absolutely like one of. He's the guy. Like he's one of, if not the strongest people in the entire story, even if he is not sort of always expressing himself like that. So yeah, it's always hype to see this. And then he does the sickest thing in the world. Like this is up there, I think, with the fight. Yeah, the fight on the back of the airplane, I think, might be my favorite set piece. But this is maybe my second favorite thing. He takes, there's a family in a sedan about to drive off a broken bridge. He takes three fishing poles, like saves the car, pulls them all. He like exerts himself in this funny panel on the right, pulls the car all the way over, and like crashes the car into the bad guy. And the bad guy like is like, if only I had more good karma. It's hilarious. This is missing the was it 2 weeks ago, I guess, or the week before this chapter, where he like had a motorcycle and like grabbed the suspension cables of the bridge and like swung across the gap. It's like some real Fast and Furious shit is what Sakamoto's pulling in these chapters.
Yeah. In the chapter, like right before that, someone throws a grenade under their car. He sticks his hand through the bottom of the car, like through the metal.
Yeah, that was like 3 or 4 chapters ago. Yeah,
that was so fun. I think one of my favorite running gags in this manga is that the civilians in this world just do not give a shit about like assassins or like the crazy shit happening around them. It's like, can I get a ride? They're like, yeah, sure.
It's very good handling of not even side characters, like minor. I'm trying to think of what words to use. Like characters that exist in your story that are just kind of there for set dressing or to be. In Sakamoto Days, it's mostly like, oh, don't let the innocent civilians die, right? Because the good guys need to protect them, whatever. The ability to take those types of characters and make them not memorable necessarily, but make them a joke or memorable in the sense that they aren't just, screaming and running away or we saved you, go run, but to make them like, here, right? This is a gag at the end of the chapter with these people. And there's other panels, I think, where they're about to drive off where they're also kind of a gag. That's good. That's good writing, in my opinion, to be able to take something that should be essentially worthless and to turn it into something substantial like a gag in a series is good. And Sakamoto Days is great at it, like you said.
Yeah, it knows exactly what it is, right? Like, it knows that this is goofy and silly and that they're not considering how civilians would react. Like, they break into, like, 2 assassins that are, like, superhumans break into, like, a ramen shop in their fight on accident. And then they order ramen. They're like, okay, sure, table for 2, or, like, it's like, it's just really fun.
It's good. This is one of the most fun series. The anime is coming this year. We got an announcement. Who knows? It may not be this year, but...
did we get an announcement for this?
I think they said it's in production. I don't think we got any other news other than that. I believe it was announced a couple of months ago, beginning of the year maybe. But yeah, Sakamoto Days it feels like there's less to say, but it's just because it's kind of consistently good and it's simple and effective at exactly what it does, which is these crazy set pieces, these fun action scenes, the kind of jokey. There's like just the right amount of drama and stakes to make it to make me invest in all these fights, and the goofy characters that are in them. Like, I mean, he's essentially fighting like JoJo character stands, right? Like the guy is like, I can create smoke from, poison smoke from inside my body that doesn't affect me, that has these weird like dots on his eyebrows.
The other guy's like Rocksteady from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He looks like the guy.
And then the character design's great. Visually, I think Sakamoto Days is one of the strongest currently running manga. I definitely think it's like One Punch Man, Sakamoto Days, and Dan like fight every week for me to be like, what was actually the best drawn thing or the best styled thing this week? It's one of those usually, and yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you mentioned is like there's not much to say exactly, right? Like me and Bruce watch movies, and when we go to see a movie, we usually spend about like 15 minutes after the movie talking about what we liked, what worked, what we didn't like, what our favorite part, what our least favorite part, all that stuff.
Yeah.
After Top Gun,
I was going to bring up Top Gun. Yep.
Stood there for like 2 minutes, and there was really nothing to say because it was such a simple movie that worked on every level for what it was trying to do. And we were just like, okay, yeah, that was sick. Planes are cool. See ya.
Yeah, it's just like, wow, yep, plane's cool. Tom Cruise is still a good action star, good actor. Yeah, I was good. When you start talking, I was like, oh, if he doesn't bring up Top Gun, I'll bring it up again because yeah, that's the perfect example of like not much to say, and that's a good thing. No news is good news a lot of times. Yeah, I mean, so again, yeah, Sakamoto Days, great. Not much to say because it's just really good at what it does. These cool set pieces, this cool action, this great action paneling, fun designs, good art, nonstop. The pacing of it is great. Like I'd have to explore more and think about why the pacing of it is so good, but it's just like perfectly paced. It feels like a lot of times when I'll catch up on a manga or start reading and catch up to like a live publishing schedule, I can really tell the difference between like, oh yeah, when I was reading it, binging it, and then when it's week to week, it's like it feels really different. Something about Sakamoto Days, I can't actually remember where I caught up in the story because it's paced so well that it feels like the whole thing has just always flowed so well together. Like I caught up, I seriously don't remember, like sometime after the plane fight, because I remember it was after that chapter where I was like, I really need to read that. You talked about it on the podcast, and I knew I was going to go through it. But yeah, I mean, it's just paced super well. Everything about the series works. What a ride.
Agreed. And if anyone listening hasn't read Sakamoto Days, it is such a low-stakes read. Mm-hmm. So, like, it is a popcorn flick. It is like the Fast and the Furious, like Bruce was mentioning.
That's probably the best comparison.
Easy to read, yeah.
Yeah, it's the best comparison with saying that if I've never seen a Fast and the Furious movie. I think I've seen some of the first or second one a couple of times, and I know that I would not like them because I don't think that they've got the like minimum viable product story and characters that I would need in an action movie. That being said, this is especially the later Fast and the Furious things where there's like superhuman shit going on. Like that's what Sakamoto Days is, right? It's like instead of car thieves, they're assassins. There's team up stuff. One guy can read minds. Why? Who cares?
Yeah.
Like just it doesn't explain anything. It doesn't need to. It doesn't over analyze. It just wants to have fun, and it does, and it's great. So.
Yeah. So a big recommendation from both of us, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else on Sakamoto Days here?
Nope. I'm all good.
Cool. I wanted to real briefly go over some of the other stuff that was published. We have a couple minutes here. Kill Blue Chapter 2 came out. We talked about Chapter 1 last week. This is the series by the Kuroko no Basket author. Old guy gets stung by a bee, turned into a little 8th grader, 9th grader. I think a 9th grader, I guess, technically. Did you read Chapter 2 of Kill Blue?
I did.
Do you remember any of it?
Kinda.
I thought it was pretty forgettable. My note here says, I do not think this has legs at all.
I liked it better than Chapter 1, but I also agree. I don't think it has legs at all.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I remember that he was like studying, and it's like, oh, studying's fun, learning's fun, scoring high is great. He like makes a friend who like had one of the most forgettable designs I've ever seen in a manga.
Yeah, it was pretty generic. I did like the friend, though. Like,
he was goofy.
There was a contrivance, and of course, like the contrivance of this like asshole in a coffee shop telling them how the real world works because he's an adult.
Right.
And of course it felt very contrived, but I don't know why, but something in my brain enjoyed that section of that chapter. Because it was very low stakes, low action. It just felt like an argument with some douchebag in a coffee shop. And I don't know why that felt better to me than anything else the first two chapters did. But it did. But either way, I agree. I don't think this Shonen Jump has room for this. I don't think it's doing anything unique or interesting.
Yeah, we'll see. Something that I'll mention in a little bit, I will go over how sometimes the first 2 or 3 chapters are not the best, but it picks up enough. I would even say Sakamoto Days, because we both started reading that when it started being published, and I think I dropped it after 2 chapters because I was like, I don't know. It's kind of boring.
The action was so good in that first chapter, it just hit for that reason.
Yeah, see, it didn't super work for me until not even that far in when I was rereading it, and the fact that I could go through, I think it was like chapter 4, whenever they had the fight in the supermarket, is when I was like, okay, wait, this is actually sick. But yeah, I'll mention another series in just a little bit that I think takes a couple of chapters to get going, so it's possible that this gets going and maybe it takes a little bit of a shot, but yeah.
While I don't think it has legs, I don't think it's anything special. I did find it better than pretty much everything but Ginka and Luna.
From like the last block? Yeah, I mean, this is better than Ichigoki. This is better than...
it's a low bar, though, right?
That's a very low bar, really yeah. I don't know if it's as good as Ayashimon. I thought Ayashimon was okay and had a more interesting kind of setting and
you're right.
tone in this, but yeah, we'll see. Who knows? The other thing I wanted to mention was Shibatarian. Chapter 3, did you ever get to go and read?
Chapter 1, but,
okay, you need to go read that. I think my opinions on this, I want to mention it because it's a super interesting, weird little horror series. I think I wish Chapter 1 had just been a one-shot. If that had been a one-shot, that would have been one of my favorite things I'd have read this year. It's keeping going, and I don't think it's getting any better by continuing this kind of mysterious story by involving like more killings and stuff, but yeah. So...
it's falling off a little bit. You think this has legs to go for a long time, or you think it's
this doesn't feel like it's going to be a long series anyway? I think this is on Jump Plus, so it could be very limited. This, I mean, absolutely. I would say at the end of chapter 1, where there was news that, hey, this is not a one-shot, I would say I do not think this has legs to go on, and I think it's proving me right. It's still interesting and cool. I just don't... kind of all the big twists, reveals, and kind of interesting places it could go are all in chapter 1. Chapter 2 and 3, it just kind of follows through and keeps going with the, like creepy killings, essentially. There's kind of nothing new in those chapters, which is, if this hits like 6 to 8 chapters, maybe 12, right? Like 1 or 2 volumes long, it could be really kind of tightly knit. But I don't, right now it's kind of like, I'm just not sure. It just feels like it's treading water in its interesting premise, and not really doing too much new or interesting with it. So
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other little things you wanted to mention of manga that we want to talk about this week?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Nah.
Cool. All right, let's talk about one more thing, a little extra thing we're talking about. I have been reading. I finished Caught Up on Medalist. That series is fantastic. Cannot recommend it enough. An amazing sports story. I cried, I bawled during moments of it. It's very super good. I've been reading Undead, Unluck, because it surprised me that this held on for as long as it did, because I did not think its first chapter or 2 were very strong. Like I said, I would mention, the first 2 chapters of this I do not think are very good. After the first 2 chapters, it introduces the kinds of things that to me should be introduced in chapter 1, right? The first 2 chapters don't give the main girl character any kind of goal or any kind of drive to her character. She doesn't have a goal until chapter 3 or 4. That, and then there's just a lot of weird, a lot of gropey stuff between the guy where because the more intimate he touches her, the more of her unluck rubs off on him. So That kind of doesn't rub me the wrong. That rubs me the wrong way. Haha, it's a joke. But I will say, after they kind of set up, they kind of maybe 4 or 5 chapters in, they set up the power system of like undead, unluck. What is it? It's like unfeeling or unchange is one of the like early kind of enemies. All these powers are sort of like something. And they know that that's how powers work, and so they have to kind of figure out which power the people they're fighting have. They introduce this kind of group of 10 that they're going to try to get into, and they do so. Unchange or unchanging is like this girl who looks young but is really old because she's unchanging. And they fight her, and when they beat her, this is like chapter 7 or 6 or something maybe. When they beat her, I thought there was some really good writing around it. So I'm like much more invested in the story now that I'm 6 or 7 or 8 chapters in than I was in the initial 2. So I definitely do understand more of why this held on, because I think its first volume is really good, even though its first 2 chapters are not that good. But yeah, but did you read a little bit of Undead Unluck or?
Yeah, like very little. I got to the part where like she kisses him in a parking garage and like a lightning bolt strikes or like a plane crashes or something like that.
Wait, that's chapter. Well, no, that's. I'm sure.
Chapter 2.
It's 1 or 2. Yeah.
It's like I think that's the furthest I got. So not at all really.
Yeah, it's okay so far. I mean, it's kind of like Sakamoto, where it's like, it's an easy read. The art's pretty okay. We'll see how far I can get. I can usually get 20 or 30 chapters before I'm really like, okay, is it worth it to keep reading this? Is it not? I'm curious because I do know later on in the story that time travel enters into it, and I'm like, I fucking love time travel stories. So the fact that that's a carrot on a stick dangling for me might make me force myself to just read it until I get to that point, because I do really like time travel stuff, and there's not enough of it, even though there's a lot of it. So
fans of the series say that segment's cool, and also how the powers are used as the series goes are really creative, which is also which is the carrot on the stick for me to want to check it out.
I would definitely say
so let me know how it is.
Yeah, the unluck powers have kind of just now gotten more. They got a little creative with it in the last chapter or 2. The undead guy has some really creative stuff he does with his powers. He'll cut his hand almost all the way off, and then he can regrow his hand really fast, and so it shoots the cut off hand out of, and he does it with his fingers. So he can shoot his fingertips and shoot his hand off by doing that. He the last fight he did, he killed himself repeatedly in order to throw blood everywhere to reveal kind of hidden magic arms that this girl had. So there's definitely some creative stuff with Undead already. So, but yeah, I mean, from what I hear, there's kind of cast expands, more powers, more stuff. So, and it, like I said, the first volume, the first 8 chapters or so, were actually pretty good. I cannot, the first 2 chapters were maybe not my jam, but got to give stuff more of a chance, I've learned. So
yeah, I agree. I especially something like this that's been going on, and
it's at 150 180 chapters or something now, almost 3.5 years. So
yeah, it has its fan base, so clearly there is something that is working that I just haven't kept up with because I didn't like the first few chapters, but I'll have to go check it out.
Yeah, awesome. And what have you been doing, Adam? Tell me.
Brother, I have been wrapping up Elden Ring. I love FromSoft games, so this is going to be bizarre to say, but I never beat Elden Ring because when I was younger, I could go through all the hard bosses and the DLC bosses in all the FromSoft games, but work got busy, and I'm I refuse to beat this game until I beat Millennia. So I did a whole second playthrough after a year after the game came out, and I beat Millennia. And now I'm in the final gauntlet of bosses. I just beat Horalu or Godfrey, and now I'm doing the last 2 bosses, which is Radagon and Elden Beast. And regardless of where I am in the game, I gotta say, as you get older, I don't know how old the listeners are here, but you kind of lose your spark for gaming.
Especially long, committed. Yeah. I've definitely been the same way. I've noticed, especially the last 2 or 3 years, where it's I cannot just sit down and marathon a game for a couple of days or weeks, with very few exceptions. Elden Ring was one of them for me. I think Tears of the Kingdom will be one coming up in a month or so here, or 2 weeks.
I agree. I played God of War Ragnarok, and I thought that was a great game, but
Yeah, same.
I don't ever think about it. Like Elden Ring is magic in a bottle in my eyes. I think this game has like, I'm almost done with it and I'm depressed. I'm like, I don't want this to end. It is so fucking good. Good job, FromSoft. You recaptured the spark in my heart for gaming. I'm looking.
You'll have to let me know because I think I'm also a pretty big fan of FromSoft. I haven't played all of their games. I think Elden Ring is by far the best game they've ever made. Just from, it's just the most fun to play and to explore and to be in the game. I get that there's a certain appeal to a lot of the FromSoft games of like they're stressful. Well, they're stressful and they're meant to be stressful, and that kind of overcoming that stress is the reward of it. But I found Elden Ring like a lot less stressful and a lot more just fun, and I think I liked that. So
there's so much accessibility options.
Yeah,
and it's
for
like
sure.
The environments are not just bleak and depressing everywhere like other FromSoft games, especially Bloodborne, which is just oppressively bleak. You know,
I mean, everything in Bloodborne is black, gray, brown, fire. Like everything is black.
Subject matter, the theme, and there's no happiness in that game. But
No.
I loved it for that reason. I also love the gothic aesthetic and all that shit. But
It definitely is cool.
Elden Ring has positivity and it's like fun to play. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the big thing about Bloodborne that like that is funny is I remember like starting the game, you're in the like regular hunter's gear, you like, oh, I got like different upgraded, and you equip it, and it's like I am wearing the same black trench coat for like half or more of the costumes in Bloodborne. Elden Ring is much more colorful, much more designed in that way, but I agree. I think Bloodborne's lore is more interesting. Is maybe not more interesting, but is my favorite just because it's like...
It is my favorite game, yeah.
Yeah,
It's just awesome.
The game is 8 years old, so we're just gonna... I'll spoil it. The sort of twist of, it's a Victorian vampire and werewolf kind of FromSoft game into the twist of, no, this is Eldritch Gods is... Yeah. I love that. That's so cool, and the way it's shown very slowly and not told is very cool.
The best Lovecraft game ever made, and
for sure,
most people won't know it's a Lovecraft game because it's a twist, you know.
Right, and it wasn't, advertised like that at all. Elden Ring has a little bit of that, but it's a lot less of a twist and more of just kind of like, there's a lot of what are they called? Outer gods. There's like a lot of outer gods, and all the interesting magic stuff you see is like part of their power, and they're all here. Yeah, so
you're right. This one's a Lovecraft game too. Just a different kind. Bloodborne feels like very much oppressive, normal Lovecraft.
Yeah. Bloodborne is Lovecraft, like cosmic horror. Elden Ring is more just like cosmic fantasy or something like that.
Yeah,
a little bit less horror. There is still cosmic horror in Elden Ring for sure. I mean, like Estelle is a pretty kind of terrifying idea in those sorts of things, but less kind of oppressively scary like you were talking about. But you'll have to let me know how you feel about it at the very end. We were talking about the best bosses and saying how all the best bosses are actually at the end of the game, which is cool.
Pretty much, yeah.
So
I like that. Either way, it has me excited to do Zelda now. Thank you, FromSoft, for selling me a copy of Zelda as well.
Sounds good. Cool. Anything else on Elden Ring?
Nope. That's about it.
Let's do it then. Thank you, everyone, for listening or watching. Don't forget to check out our two YouTube channels, the White, Gray, Black for my more condensed, curated manga content. And if you want to check the VODs of this podcast, they are on the WGB Weekly Manga Podcast channel. You can search either of those on YouTube, and they should be at the top. If you want to listen to us as a true podcast, we are on all the major podcast providers. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. You can download us through RSS. And if you enjoy this podcast and you want to support us, first of all, go to the YouTube channels. Give us a like and a subscribe there. Follow or subscribe to us on whatever podcast distributors. That is sort of the easiest, best way that you can support us. We don't really care for your money yet. If you want to give us money, you certainly can head over to a Patreon, patreon.com/WGBmanga. But really we just want more people to listen and hear and enjoy and be a part of our manga book club and our manga conversations. So go over there, give us a like, give us a subscribe, give us some comments. Tell us about how you feel. Do you think our critiques were fair for the first hour of this podcast, or maybe you think we praise Sakamoto Days and Oshinoko too much. Maybe you should be tearing into them also. But anyways, if you want to, you can check me out on the Twitter at WGB Manga. If you want to suggest something or have any of those conversations, I'm happy to have those on Twitter. As always, thank you so much for being with us this week.
See you later.
Please come back next week, and don't forget to read more manga.